Welcome to the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast.
Well, then Perez has got the better of it, and he looks to get the better of Schmeichel, and he's done it. Wilshere is going to fall here for Alexis Iwobi.
Arsenal lose 0-0 at West Ham, and if you thought that was boring, wait till you see what we have cooked up. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. I am not joined by Paul. I am not joined by Clive. I am joined by Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stilberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Hello there, indeed. So, Scott will be along with a statistical analysis of the match. Mainly, we will be looking at the goals. And then Clive has promised he will jump in later to rescue Tim from having to have a one-on-one conversation about the Arsenal with just little old me. So if you don't like my opinions, oh boy, this is not going to be a fun one. Anyway, Tim, first of all, how was the trip to West Ham?
Fairly average, really.
How is the new ground? Is it kind of a pale comparison to the Boleyn ground, as they said?
Yeah, it's very, very weird. I mean, I'm not going to say anything original about this because everyone's got it pretty much spot on. It's a nice arena, but it's just not a football ground. Like, you're miles away from the pitch. There's really odd features, like between the away fans. There's kind of some away fans in the upper tier, although it's not tiered. And then there's like a massive trampoline that separates you from the lower tier. It's very, very weird, and you're set very, very far back. And it's a fantastic athletic stadium, and I've never been to a concert there, but I'm told it's pretty decent for that as well. But it's just not a football ground, and it's really weird because of its positioning as well. It's right next to the biggest shopping centre in London, in Westfield. So, for example, West Ham aren't allowed to play at home on Boxing Day. Because it's the biggest shopping day of the year. That's bizarre. And they can't play their first two games of the season at home ever either because the ground is multi-purpose. It's used for athletics over the summer. So yeah, it's very strange. And a lot of the we kind of know places to go for a beer and stuff, but a lot of people don't. And a lot of the local kind of pubs, they weren't really banking on a football team being there. A lot of them set up with the Olympics in mind, and because Stratford and Hackney Wick and places like that are kind of becoming really redeveloped, quite bohemian areas. Most of them don't really want a football team there, so and they don't really need the business either, because they've got plenty of young, rich, bohemian people paying like £6 for 2/3 of a pint and things like that. So they're not really keen on football crowds. So like a lot of the pubs in the area don't even let football fans in. They're not interested in that kind of custom.
Amazing. So we're a long way from Green Street hooligans here, Tim.
Yeah, which is like the absolute polar opposite of what Upton Park used to be like. And Upton Park was one of my favourite grounds to go to, just because it kind of reminded me of Highbury. It's right in the middle of a housing estate. You walk through some narrow streets, and it was quite cramped inside, but it was there was a fair old racket. It was it was a little bit of a throwback, and there aren't many of those grounds left anymore. I think maybe Everton is the last like fairly sizable kind of throwback ground, and it's one of my favourites for that reason. But it's very difficult to get an atmosphere going inside the Olympic Stadium because it's so cavernous.
Well, that and the football. So, you know how, like, in some movies, like Harry Potter movies or whatever, there'll be, like, magic that prevents someone from being able to cross a threshold? You would think that a running track would prevent Giroud from being able to cross the threshold onto the pitch. But it didn't prevent him from doing that. What did you make of the lineup? He went to the back four. He brought in Giroud, Lacazette, left out. At this point, I'm starting to think that Paul and Lacazette might be the same person. I've never seen them in the room together. They seem to have this fragility about them, their inability to just turn up. What's going on?
I thought, not even being wise after the event, I thought it was a really weird lineup for a number of reasons. One of my kind of key criticisms of Arsene Wenger over the years has been that he doesn't really know how to rotate. He can be quite good when he plays the same 11 every week, but when the time comes to rotate, he doesn't really know how to do that light rotation. It tends to be wholesale or nothing. And you know, sometimes you have to do a little bit of wholesale or change 4 or 5 players. That's fine. Completely understand that. But what he really regularly fails to do when he does that is look at the team and go, right, let's at least like get some partnerships going. Like, let's look at who can play together. And he really rarely does that. So in the end, you have like Nacho Monreal playing centre half, and then 2 centre halves are left out, and Ainsley Maitland-Niles plays at left back.
The only right footer in the entire squad.
yeah. And then you end up with this quite kind of lopsided diamond midfield. And I get why he changed the midfield. I thought he might do that because without Ramsey, you know, Ramsey kind of has the energy to fill a forward role and a midfield role, and none of the other replacements do that. And that emphasises how important Aaron Ramsey's become. When he's not there, we have to change the whole system. And yeah, it just, and then kind of Alexis and Ozil behind Giroud, and you know, Alexis like really reined it in this time in terms of trying that dink over the top. But actually with Giroud up front, it probably makes a lot more sense to do that. And in many respects, I kind of just wish that we would have done what we did against Southampton on Sunday, which was just Alexis try that dink over the top interminably ad nauseum. Because it probably would have come off once with Giroud up front, as it did against Southampton. So it was all a little bit weird, to be honest. I didn't quite get some of the changes. I think, for example, you can put Welbeck in for Lacazette, and he's not as lethal in front of goal, but your team will do pretty much the same thing. Mm-hmm. And you know, I really didn't understand. You know, if you're going to give Ainsley Maitland-Niles a go, just give him a go in midfield and tuck him in with Xhaka and Wilshere. I think in many respects that would be quite balanced. And then, you know, you can play Monreal at left back, and then, you know, give Chambers a holding again. It just basically, it seemed to confuse everybody. And but that said, to be honest, I think he probably thought, he saw the West Ham game against Chelsea, thought, they're going to put 10 behind the ball again, so I'm just going to try and put creative players in there. So, you know, we have Wilshere, we had Iwobi, we had Ozil, we had Alexis, we had a passing midfielder at left back. You know, there should have been enough there to do more than we did creatively.
Yeah, and I think this is another one of those tough games. You know, I have to say, like, I tend to get outraged about things pretty easily, as you know, and I'm struggling because usually my outrage comes from the fact that we I don't like games where we struggle to control a game we should be able to control, or where we're on the back foot against teams we should be dominating. What's a little harder is when we push teams back and back and back and back and can't knock the door down, can't create the openings. That's where I have a little bit more sympathy, because I think apart from the very, very, very best teams, a lot of very good teams struggle in those situations. But I just think we failed to move them around enough. You know, they sat in that low block and they got really, really deep. And they did a little of the Burnley. They blocked a lot of shots. They crowded the area. They made it difficult for there to be shooting lanes. I thought Alexis actually got into a couple good positions where he just couldn't, there was no way through. You know, we had a lot of shots blocked ultimately, and they just frustrated us. And so I have some sympathy with that. But I think the thing you see, Tim, now is that, you know, I realize I'm saying this one game after Alexis provided Giroud with an equalizer, but those two in particular don't seem like they can play together. What did you make of the fact that this did push Alexis up? We've been talking about Alexis dropping too deep, and this moved him up the pitch a little. Ball security became less of an issue, but he didn't seem to find comfortable spaces to operate. Do you attribute that mostly to Giroud?
Maybe a little bit. I think probably, to be honest, most of it is just that Alexis is a little bit out of form, and instead what we had, you know, when he was 40 yards from goal was some fairly wayward, hopeful balls into the box. And this time, you know, I think it's quite pointed and quite deliberate that we pushed him up the pitch. And Wenger said after the game on Sunday, you know, he said quite explicitly, we don't really want him 40 yards from goal. And this almost felt like a way of forcing him. And then, you know, it was almost like a giant hint. You know, it's like, Alexis, we're going to put you pretty much up front, and we're going to put Wilshere, Iwobi and Ozil behind you. Hint, hint, wink, wink. And I think maybe I think maybe Wenger was trying to make that point a little bit too strongly. Because like I said, with Giroud up front, I actually think that's a much more viable tactic, what Alexis has been doing in recent games. Yeah. But yeah, there was a bit of that, and he was kind of really out
the
on
dink,
the left.
The dink over the top, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like out on the left / a little bit up front alongside Giroud, and it does jar a bit. And I don't think you can really play Giroud against the team who's going to do that unless you're prepared to put balls into the box for him. Which, and in many respects, I would have been more okay with that if we'd have chucked like 20 crosses in or something during the game and none of them worked. I think that's still pretty bad football, but it's something.
I mean, Manchester United had a period where they played that way, and they kind of got away with it, if I remember, sort of towards the end of the United reign. But like, I guess my question is, if you're going to do that, who's going to run onto the second ball, right? I mean, if Alexis is out wide and you don't have Ramsey, I mean, who runs on? Is it Ozil? Is it Wilshere? I mean, those aren't guys you expect to come running onto the second ball and putting it away.
Exactly, that's exactly what we missed. We had like a lot of kind of ball carriers, but none of them who are going to go beyond the striker. And if you're playing Giroud, that's kind of exactly what you need, someone running beyond him, particularly if you're going to use him in this kind of back to goal scenario. And what we just found again and again was playing the ball into the feet of Giroud, and then everyone just kind of stood there looking at him.
Does it drive you as crazy as it drives me, though, that he will never turn? He does not back himself to be like... Giroud did get the ball provided to him in some interesting spaces, and his move is always a wall pass or a flick. Yeah. I mean, this was a game of 1,000 flicks for Giroud. Like, he's got to... I think the biggest thing we lose, because Lacazette can play with his back to goal a little bit, but he is more elegant in the box in terms of his ability to turn and face. Like, is that the problem with Giroud, is that if you get the ball to him in the box other than onto his head, he doesn't create his own shots there. He's always looking to lay off.
Yeah. He needs a very specific type of service, basically. If you kind of float it up in the air somewhere and have him kind of facing goal, then yeah, he's great. But yeah, exactly, you're right. He's not going to forge anything. And also, because he doesn't really, work the channels, he's not going to move the centre-halves anywhere. And then that was exacerbated by the fact that none of Iwobi, Ozil or Wilshere are the kind of players who are going to make those runs beyond him. So, I mean, it's not difficult to see why our game became so staid and so predictable. We had a very static striker, nobody making a second man run, trying to confuse the defenders. I mean, we were just playing in front of West Ham and occasionally trying to pick the lock with Giroud. And you're right, he's not going to spin a defender. And then it becomes a kind of economies of scale thing, because the defender knows he's not going to even try and spin. So he knows he can just like get up Giroud's backside, and he does not have to be, on his toes whatsoever. He knows exactly what's coming. It's totally predictable. And it just misses that kind of surprise factor where, Lacazette has for me not impressed away from home. Well, the team haven't, but I think he hasn't
exactly had a lot of opportunities.
No, but I mean, you could say the same for Giroud yesterday. You could make the same argument, really. He wasn't exactly handed many chances.
My counter argument would be, we know what Giroud does for Arsenal. Like we have a book on him. We don't have a book on Lacazette yet. At Arsenal.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, precisely. So really probably wanted Lacazette like trying to move them around. But then again, we had him against Southampton and Burnley, and we didn't really look like breaking down either of those teams, and he was subbed by the time we scored in both of those games. So I kind of get that. He's still acclimatising. I still think that it reminds me of a discussion we were having about 12 months ago when Arsenal kept fiddling around with the midfield and couldn't find anything that worked. And, we were all saying on this podcast, look, just give Ramsey and Xhaka a run together, because it might not be perfect, but it's got a much higher potential upside than like Coquelin and Elneny, or Coquelin and Ramsey, or Elneny and Xhaka.
Or Coquelin and demigod born to play midfield, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like, there's at least a potential upside here that you put two quite talented players together, and it might not be perfect, but it might be something. And I feel that way about the front three. I just think we should be playing Alexis, Ozil and Lacazette together as often as possible.
Well, there are three best players, so you might as well, right?
Yeah, get that partnership going. Really, really make them confident in one another. And yeah, it might be a little bit loose at times. It might be a little bit improvised, a little bit jazzy, but it just looks to me. I mean, we're so dull to watch away from home. Well, when you compare, I know they were a real mess at the time, but you compare like the movement and everything against Everton. And to what we've been seeing recently, and I don't know. I just feel like we've got to just let that three play together, and because it's the biggest possible upside that we can get into this team, I think.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think the point you can make also is, see, ironically, I think games like this, you might as well put Alexis up front, and the problem is, if we don't have. And maybe the quality we want. The one thing about Alexis, and I realize he's horribly, horribly out of form, but you give it to him at the top of the box, and he'll twist and he'll turn, and he can turn either way, and he can dribble a guy, and he can move through tight spaces, and you still give him a chance with a little bit of an opening to squeeze one past the keeper. Like, I think sometimes against these compact park buses, you have two choices: battering ram, right, like pumping balls into the box, like we did towards the end against Southampton, or a dribbling battering ram, right? Someone who just keeps trying to dribble his way through, and you hope he makes one opening, and it's enough. I mean, I don't know that we have enough slick, technical, intelligent, moving players in the side to pass our way through the team. And with Giroud, you're not going to get the movement. You're not going to move them around because he's a focal point, right? So you can be swinging passes laterally, left, right, reversing the field, whatever. But if Giroud's just standing in the middle of the box the whole time, the center backs can just use that as their focal point. It just didn't work. Look, before we get any further in this specific match, and I think we should talk Jack Wilshere, because I think he had a really interesting performance. I also want to talk about Iwobi, who frustrates the hell out of me, and I want to kind of get your take on that. But really quickly on Lacazette. Look, when Arsene loves a player, you can tell. Mesut Ozil arrived from a situation in Real Madrid where he basically never played more than an hour. And Arsene never dropped him and never subbed him. And Alexis arrived, and he never dropped. I mean, I'm talking past the first, 3 games. Never dropped him, never subbed him. Lacazette has been dropped for every big game against Spurs at home. He is subbed at 60 minutes every game, or 70 minutes every game. And what astounded me in this match is not only that he didn't start, put that aside, but that he came on with 8 minutes to go. I mean, that's when you bring on J. Emmanuel Thomas. Not, you know what I mean? Like I've run out of ideas, so here, you try something. Like, not when you bring on your 50 million pound striker. We've talked about this with Xhaka last season, and he sort of grew into becoming a first choice player in every match. But I still have concerns that something is up with Arsene Wenger and his trust in Lacazette. Do you think it's purely a lack of trust in his physical ability to play in the Premier League game in, game out, or do you think there's something more at work?
It's, at the moment, I think the only evidence we've got to go on is physical, but I think you're quite right. I mean, it's close to Christmas now, and this keeps happening, and you're right. Usually, if a team is minded to kind of rotate one of their star players out, usually what happens is if it's 0-0 after like 55 minutes, 60 minutes, they're straight away, or the second the team gets in trouble. And he brought Welbeck on first, and I like Danny Welbeck, but I just don't understand that. I mean, what do you think Danny Welbeck's going to do on the right wing against a 10-man defence? Like, he's not that likely to score.
We just saw what he's going to do in that situation against Southampton. Whole bunch of fucking nothing. And by the way, worst Danny Welbeck appearance at Arsenal, in my opinion, that I've ever seen. I have never seen him worse than that. Yeah, he's really struggled of late, and he's still struggling, which surprised me so much that he was the first one to come on. And what, like, is he gonna, like, he's got a lot of useful qualities, but picking the lock of a 10-man defence, either creatively or by taking a quarter chance, like, those aren't his qualities. I just found it really, really odd.
And yeah, like absolutely, like just putting Lacazette on kind of on the wing with 8 minutes to go. That feels kind of quite pointed. I don't know if it's just because we've got 3 games in a week and he doesn't think he's up to the kind of physical intensity yet to be able to do that, because he's rarely able to complete 90 minutes at the moment. But yeah, it does feel a bit weird. And we know like a bit of the history of Lacazette as well. It's a signing we probably could have made 2 years earlier than we did if we really wanted to. So you've always got that nagging feeling that he settled on him because, he just couldn't find anything else over a period of several years, and he just thought, right, I've got to pull the trigger on something. He went for Vardy before he went for Lacazette, which, so yeah, it does feel a little bit pointed at this stage, particularly because Alexis is not in great form. Ozil was in great form, but the last couple of games hasn't really been up to much. Like he should be like the star player after those two, really, and those two haven't been performing for the last few games, and he still kind of feels like an afterthought. Which, yeah, I think at this point you can really question where that is.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Lacazette has impressed me. I've liked him. I'm not going to say he's been incredible, but he's actually been, I think, better than I expected. Like, I think he's been good, but one of the ways that you acclimatize, one of the ways that you hit your stride is you play a lot. I mean, you have to play with your teammates, you adapt to the league, and I just wonder if we're getting so stop-start with Lacazette here that it'll be hard for him to get into any kind of run of red-hot form. And the one thing about strikers, all strikers, they're streaky. I mean, there may be no streakier striker than Olivier Giroud, who can score a goal every match for 13 and then no goals every match for 20. But strikers are streaky. There is confidence. I know people hate talking about confidence, but confidence plays into your finishing. It plays into your performance. And you want your strikers to get on a good run of finishing and form and then play them constantly. And I wonder if, with Lacazette and the way he's being used right now, it's actually undermining his ability to hit his stride. And for Ozil and Alexis to develop that partnership with him, because I would say up until the Southampton game, when the three of them have started together, it's mostly been encouraging. So, it's disappointing that's not happening. Look, one of the interesting things about playing the back four is it kind of reminded you of all the scary things that you can see when we play in a back four. Not that we don't see them in a back three. I was really interested in Nacho Monreal's performance. He's a player I adore. He's not a center back in a back four. And this is where I wonder if Arsene Wenger lets himself down a little bit, is kind of not appreciating, maybe not, he doesn't appreciate them, he's a smart guy, he gets it, but overrating his players' ability to just be complete Swiss Army knives. I thought Monreal struggled a little bit, and the thing that was interesting to me, Tim, is he was playing it like it was still a back three. At times, he was 35 yards from the West Ham goal. I mean, poor Koscielny's Achilles might have been, asking to be subbed off. Like, are you concerned with seeing us in the back four kind of being reminded, oh yeah, we don't have the positional discipline for this?
Yeah, maybe. And also, they've all been playing a back three for the last, 8 months now. So I appreciate they've switched in game on occasion, but that's usually when we're chasing a game and not doing very much defending. So it stands to reason that it would take them a little while. And Nacho's he's never really been a centre-half in a back four anyway. So you've got that added kind of, apart from a very brief period about 3 years ago, I've never done this. And that's another reason why I thought it was such an odd selection, especially given the fact that Koscielny, the last couple of weeks is beginning to look his age a little bit. And
would you have gone with one of the young centre halves and moved Nacho to the fullback?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because by the way, I thought Maitland-Niles, after a little bit of a rocky start, kind of recovered. I mean, the one thing about him is much like Bellerin, he can run and run and run, and he's got tons of pace to burn. And the way we play, you need recovery pace to save your ass, and he has it.
Yeah, and also West Ham kind of left that side of the pitch alone. It was our right-hand side that really crowded, which is why Maitland-Niles, I think he put 4 crosses in, and I think that was largely because they kind of left him to his own devices. But yeah, he was perfectly fine there, and that was quite encouraging. But yeah, I think Koscielny and Monreal, that just in a back four, that just, I don't know, I don't really get what Rob Holding's done. at the moment. I know he's had like the odd, slightly dodgy game, but not.
Well, this comes back to the way the Arsenal is, though. He's got his players he trusts, and he finds ways to use those players, right? I mean, there are certain players that, if he's given the slightest opportunity, he's going to lean towards those guys. Monreal is certainly one of them. Olivier Giroud is one of them. We've seen in the past Francis Coquelin be one of them. He wants to use the guys he wants to use. Yeah,
and I think, but then, like, you put Ainsley Maitland-Niles into that equation for his first ever Premier League start. It does, again, it feels quite pointed towards Chambers and Holding that they're just not really trusted at the moment. And I get, young players have peaks and troughs early in their career, but with Holding, it's starting to feel almost Chambers-like, where he just very, very suddenly, very quickly, completely lost faith in Callum Chambers, and it's beginning to feel a bit like that with Holding. I don't,
Can I offer a possibility? I mean, is he looking at it and saying, I'm going to have to start Holding once this week. I'd rather start him at home against Newcastle than away.
Yeah.
I mean, could that be the case, maybe, that Holding will come in for the home game, and so he didn't want to expose him? I mean, if that's the case, you'd say, well, why expose Maitland-Niles, who's even less experienced? Isn't it also sort of a sign of sort of the problem with the construction of the squad that none of us would argue that Kolasinac probably needed to be taken out of the firing line, that his performances had really dipped, but that the only option that was left to us with Nacho at center back is a youth player who hasn't played in the Premier League at all? I mean, that's really the problem, right? And we've talked about this in other pods, there are players that maybe need to be sat down or need to be taken out of the firing line, but there's no quality alternative waiting for them.
Yeah, precisely. And I mean, another, what might have been in his thinking with Holding was, well, Holding has only ever played for Arsenal in a back three, bar that Barté game the other week, which, for an Arsenal centre half was little more than a training exercise. So, maybe he was thinking that. Maybe he was thinking, well, look, I'm changing the defensive shape, so I'm going to go with my two most experienced centre halves to try and countenance that. But yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a massive vote in confidence. This Rob Holding, who played in the FA Cup final against the likes of Diego Costa and Eden Hazard, and played against Man City, and he trusted him to do that when he had other options, but he didn't trust him to do that. It feels...
Well, and to be fair, that was in the back three, so maybe he felt he had a little more protection there. I mean, it's hard to kind of read Arsenal's mind at this point. What I will say is that, he's going to have to do some rotating, and maybe, just maybe, he felt he could get away with a young fullback and experienced center back in this one, and he'll bring in the young center half for the home game. I want to get to the attacking half of the pitch and talk Iwobi and Jack Wilshere. Before we do that, I want to get to Scott and get the statistical section in here. But Tim, as a final thought, once again, Theo Walcott left out, a player that I think we maybe could have used this day to have someone who's playing on the the last shoulder, who could make those runs. He had the best game of recent memory in the Europa League, and I admit against horrendous opposition under no pressure, and hasn't even been in the match day squad since. Is this ominous? Is he off?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, and then he had that cold a few weeks ago, which seemed to keep him out for about 3 weeks. To be fair, Mesut Ozil is about to get his too. It's usually late December, early January. Yeah, true. Yeah. But if Theo Walcott can't even get on the bench when we've switched to this system, then I think the writing's totally on the wall. I think in January he'd probably like to keep Giroud around, but with Walcott, I think this is a kind of almost trying to push him out the door, because it seems like Theo's quite happy, and he's quite happy. I don't want to cast too many aspersions, so he's quite happy picking up his wage, but he's probably not going to get paid somewhere else. Like, I think he'd rather play. So, I mean, I think he'd rather play. I mean, to be fair to Theo, he didn't do anything to create this situation. I mean, he played against Bate, he dominated, he was the best player on the pitch, and he can't get in the squad. Yeah, I don't think he's bogarting us or anything, but he might have fallen into a bit of a comfort zone and just, but most people wouldn't go and do the same job somewhere else for less money, no matter how much they're earning. So you're right, it's not of his making. He was given that contract, but I do wonder if Arsenal's trying to force the issue here a bit and just kind of saying, look, you're not in the plans, and if you want to sit around and pick your money up, that's fine, but you're not really going to be part of the team. And the thing is, Arsenal have to generate some cash, because Alexis is going, Ozil is going, Cazorla has not been replaced, Koscielny's ageing, Cech is ageing, Monreal is ageing. We are not getting a penny for any of these players, not one of them. We will not get a single penny for any of them. So we need to generate cash. And Walcott, at the moment, is a sellable asset. And if someone like... I don't know how likely it is that we'll get rid of him on anything other than a loan deal, certainly in January, but he's one of our sellable assets. And I think at the moment, someone like Reece Nelson could be looking at Theo Walcott's current role in the squad, which is, occasionally on the bench, occasionally not. And Reece Nelson should be looking at that role and saying, well, yeah, I could do that next season. I could be the kind of the 19th guy, as it were. But when you've got Alexis and Ozil not in great form, Welbeck's not in great form, he hasn't, this was the first time he'd started Olivier Giroud this season, and Walcott still couldn't even get on the bench. I think that tells you quite a lot.
Yep. Yeah, and especially in a back four, so you can't even say, well, the system just doesn't suit him. You referenced that. So, yeah, I agree with you. Look, let's do this. We're going to talk to Scott. We'll hear all about our impotence, our sterility, all those things that my doctor has been giving me some solutions for. Maybe I can give Arson some solutions for them as well. Okay, when we come back, Clive will be on, and then we can talk some real football. Here we go. Okay, so Scott is here. You can find Scott on Twitter at O_that_crab. You can find his work at crabstats.blogspot.com. And if you're new to the podcast, Scott gives us a little bit of a data statistical perspective on the match. We are not going to break down the goals in this segment because we didn't score any. But that doesn't mean there isn't great data to look at to tell us just went wrong. What went wrong in the attacking half? Scott, what went wrong?
Just about everything.
Okay, overall, it was good talking to you.
Overall, the XG for the match was 1.19 for Arsenal and 0.2 for West Ham, and then 0.9 in the shots model and 0.4. So overall, didn't miss much if you missed the game. Not a lot of shots, not a lot of good chances. Arsenal took 22 shots, but had an average XG of just 0.04, which is well below the average of 0.11 per shot that they've averaged this season. And a lot of that went down to West Ham sitting in their low deep block and not contesting the midfield. Okay,
so in terms of the way we attacked, obviously we weren't creating quality chances. The chances we got were lower quality. They didn't create a whole hell of a lot, but we didn't either. So probably a fair result on that measure. But what are you seeing that indicates to you that they kind of abandoned midfield and sat deep?
So I have a thing where I look at the defensive actions that each team does. So that, fouls, tackles, interceptions, and all sorts of dispossessed of those kinds of certain things. And West Ham had just 7 defensive actions total in the middle third. Seeing with how many times Arsenal passed in the middle third, the passes per defensive action were over 20, which is really showing that West Ham sat really deep off the ball. They only had 1 defensive action in Arsenal's defensive third. So
can I stop you for a minute? Because, for example, teams that press, right, like a Liverpool or a Spurs, for example, they'll have the number of passes per defensive action of their opponent will be what, like 6 or 7, something like that?
That's correct.
And so you're saying in the midfield, the passes per defensive action for West Ham were in the 20s?
Yes, there was, I think, 25. I don't have the right number.
So that kind of gives you a good contrast, right? Like a pressing team might give you 7 passes before they commit a defensive action. West Ham was giving us 20, 25 or so. So very, very low pressure in the middle of the field.
Exactly. So a lot of that will lead to Arsenal having 67% of the total touches. So there's looking at the different ways to calculate possession, about 70% of the possession. But a lot of that was very sterile possession. So they did have 43 touches in the box, but that was only 11% of the final third touches that Arsenal had. So a lot of that in that U shape around the box. And then of the 43 touches that Arsenal had in the box, just 16 came in the danger zone. And I consider the danger zone the 6-yard box plus the center of the 18-yard box. And then breaking it down even further, looking at from the penalty box or the penalty spot in, Arsenal only had 5 touches there. So as we get closer and closer to goal, Arsenal are getting less and less touches. Making this even worse is that the touches that they were getting in these good locations, they were not converting them into shots. So normally in the danger zone, Arsenal convert about 60% of their touches into shots. And inside of the penalty zone in towards the goal, they convert almost 70% of those touches into shots. In this game, just 25% of the danger zone touches were shots, and just 40% inside of the penalty spot to goal were shots.
I smell a Giroud influence. How many of those touches were Olivier?
He had about 60% of both of the danger zone and the shots, and the touches inside of the penalty area.
So what you're telling me is that Giroud plays with his back to goal, gets the ball, lays it off, flicks it. He doesn't turn and shoot. So in other words, Giroud was occupying the areas where ordinarily we'd get shots, and when he was getting the ball there, he wasn't getting shots.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So he had 2 shots total in the danger zone and 1 shot in the penalty area to the goal. And yeah, so he had a total of 11 danger zone shots or danger zone touches. So he was really just ineffective in converting his possession into offense.
So he
and
shot
a lot of those
about
and passes did not come off either. So it was a lot of turning the ball over in that spot and not converting that dangerous attempts into anything.
So in other words, basically to sum it up, essentially, he turned his touches in those danger zones into about a third of the amount of shots that we'd expect on average from when our players have touches in those areas.
Exactly. So if you were watching the game, I think that's about what you would have expected to. So the stats really back up what we saw.
Yeah, and I wonder if some of that's also the loss of Ramsey. I mean, Ramsey arriving late, secondary runs, a lot of times he's the one getting those touches and putting in shots from the danger zone. I think Lacazette, obviously, because he turns and faces and he runs in behind. When he gets the ball in those areas, he's already facing and he can shoot. And, it's just a reminder that what Giroud wants to do is he wants to collect the ball in the danger zone, but then bring in a teammate. He is not creating his own opportunities, and it's very, 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 very hard, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, to complete passes in those areas of the pitch.
It definitely is. So, yeah, I mean, how many times have we seen him try to, recreate that Norwich goal with the flicks? But the reason that was such an amazing goal is because it's so hard. And those kinds of things don't come off all the time. And I think that defenders know that that's what he's going to try. And they crowd it out.
There you go.
Another thing that I did want to touch on here is, so I know we're slagging off Giroud here a little bit, but I also think that there's been a pretty big change in the way that Alexis has been attacking. So his number of touches in the box is down significantly this season compared to last season. So last season, he was averaging over 7 touches in the box per game, and this year he's down to just over 5. And then also his touches, even inside of the danger zone, has gone way down. So last year it was over 1 per game, and now it's down to 0.5 per game. So he has spent a lot more time outside of the box and in the wide areas instead of getting into dangerous spots to create offense for him. So he might be looking for other players, but he is definitely not doing as good of a job getting himself into positions to shoot this year.
So to sum it up, you have a center forward who isn't taking shots when he's in the area you need to, and you have arguably your best player and certainly best goal scorer not getting into the positions to score goals, and all of a sudden you can see why you wind up with a 0-0 draw. It makes a lot of sense. Real quick before we let you go, and I know we are both under extreme time pressure here. Do you happen to have PPVA up in front of you from the match? Just curious if Jack Wilshere, I mean, he caught the eye. Did he catch the statistical eye?
Yeah, so he actually had a really good game. Part of this is due to the midfield not being contested, but he had I believe it's let me count here, the 5th best game for Arsenal.
In terms of passing value added?
Yeah, so he had a .27, so that's behind Hector Bellerin, Alexis, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, and Mesut Ozil. On a per 50 passes, he was 4th.
Okay.
So overall, he had a pretty good game, I would say. I did notice that the split between the halves was pretty significant. In the first half, he was a lot better, but it looked like about after that 60, 70-minute mark, he kind of dropped off some. So it could just be playing 90 minutes is tough for him. Yeah. But yeah, I thought he looked good. The stats say that he passed pretty well. And
yeah, we don't want to leave on a down note just picking on Giroud. I mean, I do, but we can't do that for the listeners. So in any event, Scott's on Twitter at _that_crab. You can find his stuff on crabstats.blogspot.com. Scott, hope that we have many, many, many multitudes of goals to break down after the Newcastle match.
Yep.
All right, we'll talk to you then. Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, well, again, these stat sections do a great job telling you what we already knew, which is we didn't do a great job attacking their goal, we didn't score any goals, and it wasn't a lot of fun. So, Clive is on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Welcome on, Clive.
Hello.
Great, you're off to a flyer. Anyway, I am starting to wonder what's the point of Alex Iwobi. And I hate to kick players, young players, developing players. On the ball, he reminds me of Oxlade-Chamberlain a little bit. On the ball, you see this flash of talent. He'll have a surging run through the midfield. He'll have a couple of very quick, close control touches to get out of trouble, and you think, yeah, that's it. And then he will just use the ball so poorly. Much like Oxlade-Chamberlain, he switches off the ball, and he uses the ball so poorly. There was a period late in the game where Alexis Sanchez ran the length of the pitch to defend in his own area and make a key saving tackle, and he ran right past a walking Alex Iwobi. There was a whole hour of the match where Hector Bellerin might as well have sat down and had a beer because Iwobi just never looked at him, never gave him the ball. Clive, what is Iwobi's role for us right now? What does he need to do to start influencing these games a little bit more?
Well, you could have stopped the question at what is Iwobi?
What is Alex Iwobi? No idea. Not sure.
As soon as you start to get into that sort of questioning, you're in problems. And then you got to say to yourself, okay, have we got the manager and the coaching infrastructure to bring him on? And I'm generally concerned. I had my Iwobi rant about 3-4 weeks ago. And the reason
that was your Da one, right? Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll get. But what I said, it was unfair. It was unfair because it wasn't really much to do with football. It was more to do with his focus and his approach. And I sometimes feel we judge people on our exposure to the players, and sometimes we see things online and we judge them. But with Iwobi, I try to keep it about what I see on the pitch. And what I see on the pitch is somebody that's a halfway player. He's a half forward, or he's a half midfielder, or he's a half winger, or he's a half central player. But come the moment in the game, no matter how he's deployed, I'm not sure he feels his role that he needs to provide on the day. And what I saw at West Ham, I'm not sure what Tim said so far, but Jack came into the game, he solidified his role. And when I saw Iwobi, if there was a heat map, it must have been 3 yards away from Jack. So straight away, we are narrow, we have no width, we have no purpose. So is that his fault as a young player? And when the teams lined up in the tunnel and the back three players were Jack, Maitland-Niles and Iwobi, I felt a sense of pride that we got 3 academy players going out in a Premiership game. But then I'm thinking, okay, Maitland-Niles, you're playing left back. Iwobi, you're playing right forward. Is that really your spot? And the only one that was really in his rightful place was probably Jack, but even that's debatable. So I wonder about him. Technically, he dances around the ball. He doesn't give me any conviction. I don't think he works hard enough. I think he walks. And the reason why I pick on him a little bit is because I just think he has it all. I think he has it all. When he's hot, when he's motivated, when he's feeling confident, I think his level could be really high. But right now, I'm not sure I want him anywhere near the team. I'm just not sure. I think he's really slowing us down. I don't trust him. I just don't trust him. And I hate saying that about young players that have come through academy since they're 8 years of age. But I really worry about him if he's getting coached correctly, if he's given the right instruction, if he's being managed appropriately. I'm just not sure he is.
And look, we are a team that already has it in our DNA to be poor off the ball, to be too ball oriented, to not understand space, not know where we need to be, not be positionally disciplined. And so we can't afford to start bringing in players who are the worst of that, who switch off the ball. That's why I hated Oxlade-Chamberlain. Switched off the ball, didn't understand how to bring his teammates into the game. And the interesting thing is just that, I look at a guy like Cesc Fabregas. Cesc Fabregas didn't have a single physical skill that he was born with. I mean, obviously, immense talent at passing a football. But what I mean is, he's not super strong. He's not super big. He's not super fast. His feet weren't super quick. Yep. He's not agile. He sees the football pitch 2 seconds before everything happens. They say he takes the pictures and he sees the pictures and he knows where people are going to be before they're there. Iwobi's like the opposite. He's strong when he wants to be. He has a burst when he needs it. His feet are quick and agile, and he doesn't see anything happening on the pitch. He's very reactive. He's a very reactive player, and it's a problem. And I think the fact that he failed to use Bellerin at all really hurt us. When Bellerin finally started to get involved in the game late, we had a few of our best moves. But, I mean, look, I don't want to kick Iwobi too much. I mean, Tim, do you have any quick coda to that on Iwobi's role in the squad? And does he have one?
I actually thought he played really well in the first half. I thought
he had those highlight moments, right? He had that one really sparkling run. The one I'm thinking of, that surging run.
Yeah. And he hit the post. But I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking more about the way he linked up the two areas of the pitch. So the reason I think he was there was kind of to babysit Jack, because Jack's not, or Wenger had some well-placed doubts about how much Jack could cover the ground and carry the ball forward over 90 minutes. Now, I mean, Iwobi's big problem is that he fades, and he faded quite badly in the second half just before he came off. In the first half, I thought he was joining up play really nicely, actually. I thought he was nice and strong. I thought he won the ball back a few times and kind of created a few potential transitions for us. But I think overall, the way I would summarise the issue with Iwobi, and it's not one that worries me, because I think you see this a lot with players his age, of his type. When he plays as a number 10, he looks like a number 8. And when he plays as a number 8, he looks like a number 10. So he's not quite sure what he is yet, basically. He's not quite decisive enough
to be a 10.
To be a 10, yeah. But at the same time,
he's a halfway player.
He is at the moment.
He's not quite one or the other.
You have to have end product to be a 10. This is
where I think he needs some.
Let's all give our opinion at once and see which one we can hear.
Sorry, man, but Tim, I know where Tim's going. He needs to either be strong in one role or the other, so we can see him and recognise him and judge him accordingly. So, Tim, your point actually is really valid. On the ball, he wasn't too bad, but I want him to be 8 yards further wider, because that's what the team needed on the day. And so I'm now judging him on his feeling for the game, not for his technical skill. His feeling for, if he felt the game, he wouldn't have come inside, it would have been wider, because that's what the game required. Now, maybe that's a bit much to ask for a young player, but that's what I'm hoping for, because he can play wide, he can play inside. And that's a talent. Can he apply himself appropriately?
Tim, what's your opinion on Iwobi?
So I just wonder on this occasion if he was instructed to, at least at the beginning of the game, to kind of sit in with Wilshere a little bit. Maybe he was told to tuck in and just be like, look, I could see the both of you, playing a wall pass and getting us moving quite nicely. But, Wenger might have had, as I do, as doubts over whether Wilshere can really do that ball carrying thing over 90 minutes. As it turned out, I'm sure we'll come on to this. As it turned out, I think Wilshere looked pretty good at that. And so I think you've got a point there, Clive, in that after about 55, 60 minutes, when it was apparent that Wilshere was doing just fine physically, maybe at that point, but it depends on what the manager's instructions are, but maybe at that point he can go, right, actually Jack looks all right here. I can go and help help Bellerin get down the line.
Let's come on to Jack.
From the centre.
Yeah, let's come on to Jack. I mean, look, I can only say what I see. I can't say what other people want to hear. I mean, I can. I'm not going to do that. I think I've proven that. Like, I can't help it. I saw a really good performance from Jack Wilshere. I thought he was really, really good. I thought he was press resistant. I thought he broke the press well. I thought he rode the challenge as well. I thought he was strong. I thought he had more of the burst than I expected. His range was better than I expected. He showed some of the touch and technique that I thought had maybe left his game. He really grew in the game. Now, do I think he needed to vary his passing a little, that he is still too much caught up in the one-touch, tiki-taka, edge-of-the-box kind of passes? Maybe, but this was not a great performance from the team, and I thought he stood out. I mean, Tim, did he catch your eye? Did he stand out in a way you weren't expecting?
Yeah, he did a bit. I tell you how actually it was his defensive contributions that really stood out for me.
He had a big two-footed tackle where he got the ball late that was just crucial.
Yeah, and he had a lot of interceptions as well. And actually, I thought he played with a kind of intelligence that I don't always associate with Jack, and I thought it was very encouraging. Because the thing is with Jack, right? I don't think his athleticism will ever quite come back. It might, but I'm not sure it will. And so, when he was younger, it was very much, give me the ball and I'll go forward with it. I'll knock it about. I'll pop up everywhere. And I don't think he can do that anymore. And he's going to have to adjust to that. And one of the things I think he's going to have to do is pick his moments to go forward, to really have a good read of the game and think, right, there's a bit of space there. I'm going to go for it now because I can't do this 15 times a game anymore. I can only do it 2 or 3. But I've got to pick my moment. And actually, I thought he did that quite well. So yeah, I was actually quite encouraged because over the last kind of couple of months, there's been such a kind of desire from the fan base to see him, and I really think a lot of his performance has been over exaggerated.
Totally agree.
But he was very decent, and if we're talking about his long-term future, we're really going to have to work out what kind of role he can have. And I think, watch very closely as to whether he gets picked again on Saturday. Does Arsene think that he can play? He can start 2 matches in 3 days. I guess that he doesn't at the moment, and he might hold him back for that other West Ham game in the Carabao Cup. But yeah, I thought this was encouraging because I was very much getting to the stage of writing Jack off, really. And this has kind of given me a bit of pause for thought. If you're asking me to put money down, I'd say I still don't think he's going to get a new contract. But I'm not as sure as I was kind of 36 hours ago, put it that way.
We play Liverpool at the Emirates on Friday, and I think there's a good chance, Friday of next week, I think there's a good chance we will see Jack in that game and not again until that game. I mean, the thing this performance did is it made it pretty clear to me that he is the Ramsey replacement or Ramsey is out, that Iwobi's not good enough to be that guy, and I unfortunately think we still have to handle Jack with kid gloves, but it's encouraging. Look, this could be a blip. I have been of the opinion that Jack is done and his Arsenal career is done. I have to admit this changed my opinion. There was a moment where he was kind of bracketed in midfield. He received the ball in the half turn the way he can and burst away from them, and just contrasting that against Xhaka, who has the turning range of a tractor trailer, a semi-truck, and gets the ball, and after 7 touches, he's oriented in the direction he wants to be, and if it's on his left foot, he can make a really sexy pass if he's under no pressure. It was nice to see that from Jack. He looks light on his feet again. He looked like he felt comfortable, under the pressure and under the challenges in the Premier League. I mean, Clive, I don't want to overhype this, but it's hard not to be at least a little bit excited by a player that I was ready to throw in the scrap heap.
And me too. I've got no point. I've got no shame in saying I heard he was done, not just at Arsenal, but at the top level of football. And that's what I heard, and I believed it, and I was very sceptical about him. And Tim goes through all the games, and within 5 or 10 minutes, the fans are calling his name. I'm thinking, come on, just get serious. But this game was a real place you could judge. And West Ham were decent in centre midfield. I thought he was strong in the challenge. I thought he was strong in possession. I thought he felt the game. He knew when to be deep. He knew when to go and join. I thought And I always look at when players give you the ball, and everyone was giving him the ball. And I felt I know Ozil's also a very strong personality on our pitch, but I thought the two of them looked like those were the two players that the other players trusted to keep it and to get us going. And I thought his personality was growing within the game. I was hugely impressed, and for me, that's his best game back by a mile.
Yeah,
I just thought he was tremendous leadership-wise.
Did it lead you to think that maybe he can play in central midfield? I think one of our points we've made on this pod is whatever future is left for him is closer to the box, is more as one of the two behind the striker. Did this give you at least pause to consider him as a possible central midfielder again?
Absolutely. There was what impressed me was not what he did when he was hot, because you know what Jack's like, he knows the game, but when he was tired and he was struggling, he had a couple of possessions where he's got the ball, he's protected it with his backside and just pushed people off, bang. Then he found the defensive side of his game, as Tim alluded to. Later on, offensively he was strong, he's always strong, but defensively he built a trust, and we worried about his mobility. We worried about what Ramsey does with his marathon running ability and metronomic movement. We thought, Jack can't do that. But what Jack did is he picked his moments to target collisions, and he made collision tackles that were almost like playmaking tackles. And I thought he's a smart player. He does it differently, but he controls that space. And I'm a big fan of centre midfielders being in centre midfield. And so stylistically, he suits my eye more than Ramsey does. While I recognise belatedly, maybe I've been very critical of Ramsey historically, but I can see the player that he is now. But stylistically, I really like how Jack played last night. I thought he was very good. Yeah,
and I think. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, I was just going to add two things. One good and one maybe to bring it down a little bit. He had the best pass completion of all of the players on the pitch, which I think is significant given how often this season we've been guilty of giving the ball away in dangerous areas. He really looked after it. But I think the caveat is that West Ham pretty much conceded the midfield altogether. So perhaps this wasn't the stiffest test for him. Nevertheless, it's still, I think he's earned a shot at maybe a stiffer test, if that makes sense.
It does. Tim, do you think he faded late on? I thought he dropped away a little bit late on.
Only a little bit. But
only a touch, but just didn't quite have it late on. What do you think?
Yeah, but not nearly as much as like that Norwich game in the Carabao Cup. I thought he was done in the second half, basically.
I agree.
And quite a lot of Europa League games, I've been thinking about the 60-minute mark. I've been thinking, you've kind of had enough now. But he looked stronger in this game to me than any other game I've seen in this season.
I can just caution you for a minute. As a top level athlete myself, it's not necessarily in the heat of the moment when you see the problem. It's how you recover. Recovery is the measure of a top level athlete. And so the question isn't how he felt on the pitch during that game. It's how do you feel the next day? How does he feel the day after that? Does his body recover? Can his body get back to being ready to be at the top level again within 3 days or within a week?
Yeah.
Look,
he might have rigor mortis today, but
that's my favorite show, by the way.
He was good.
Fantastic show.
But I think Elliot, I think he really embarrassed Iwobi, and that's the thing that concerns me. I thought he worked harder than him. Somebody younger, just fitter, just had no big injury, and I'm concerned he's lasting better than Iwobi.
Well, and yeah, I mean, look, the reality is it wasn't a vintage performance for anyone, and Jack stood out, and I don't think he just stood out because other players were crap. I think he was genuinely good. Look, I think Danny Welbeck, obviously he had a stinker. Iwobi, I think, especially in the second half, I agree with Tim that the thing that was good about Iwobi is he's press resistant, and he helped us, break the press and get out of trouble early on at a period that could have been a little tricky. Eventually, the thing about this game is it's easy to kick us and say we were terrible. We pushed them back and back and back and back, and towards the end of the game, they were all the way into their box. I just think that's where we lacked the quality, and then that's been the story away from home, and that's been the story the last two games. A final thought here is that Alexis got subbed off. That's what everyone's been asking for. He's terrible. Drop him, sub him. But ultimately, Tim, I didn't see us do anything with Alexis off the pitch that blew my hair back. I acknowledge it wasn't a long period of time. I mean, as bad as he's been, and I totally admit he's out of form, you still would have backed him to be the one to find a decisive moment, right? I mean, do you think that was the wrong call?
Yeah, I do a little bit. I kind of tend to think if you're going to do that, do it on about 70 minutes and, completely, give him the hint that you want to give him and, completely change the setup of the team if you must and do something different. Doing it with 8 minutes to go just kind of it felt a bit pointless by then, to be honest. And like you said, he wasn't really much worse than he was against Southampton. But in the 87th minute against Southampton, he was able to produce something. And I tend to think he was playing on the instruction not to keep doing that dinked over the top through ball. And he looked to me a little bit like he's not been playing that well anyway, but he's still been producing. Whereas last night, he just kind of looked like he was out of form, and he didn't look like producing anything either. But yeah, I do think it was, like I say, bring him off on 65, 70 minutes, or it just felt a bit like a gesture. And then to put Lacazette on the left wing with 8 minutes to go, I mean, it just felt pointless at that point. And I think it's a bit symptomatic of what Wenger's been doing for the last couple of years, which is he doesn't really have a clear vision of what this team is and how it plays. And what he's trying to do now is every couple of months he's just trying to shock them into something. So it's like, I'll go to a back three because I don't know what else to do. And now that's bedded in and that's not new anymore. It's like, we'll go back to a back four and I'm going to bring Alex. It just feels like he's been reaching, and this felt, this felt a little bit like that. Like he was just like, I tried to drop him in March and that didn't work, and I'm going to kind of take him off, I guess, and make a bit of a point, but it all just feels a bit halfway house.
It doesn't feel like a plan. And again, we talk about being reactive versus proactive. It feels very reactive. And I mean, I think this is where Arsene gets himself in trouble. When he gets into a rocky patch, sometimes he starts going down strange roads to try to solve the problem. And so my question to you, Clive, to wrap this up, with Newcastle at the Emirates on Saturday, it's a chance to get back on the right side of the ledger. And I mean, I could see us beating them 5-0, 6-0, 7-0 if we get it right, because even in these games where we've been poor, we've been dominating possession, we've been controlling the ball in the final third. So is the trick here for the manager not to try to be too clever? Alexis, Lacazette, Ozil, put the best players on. We've been scintillating at home. Get a win, get a big win. Rotate completely for Carabao Cup. We need to start pointing in the right direction ahead of Liverpool coming to the Emirates. And that starts by getting our mojo back in the final third. I mean, would you just go back to the best players and trust them to figure it out at home?
Yeah, well, there's a first 11 that we can all name. And there's a formation that we debate, but I like the three at the back. Not because I like three at the back, it's just that I like three at the back for this group of players, because I think it just covers the pitch and I think we just look more balanced. But only for that first 11, and maybe Jack has made it 12, but the rest, I'm not sure. I was disappointed in Welbeck massively. I think I'm not sure what sort of health he's in. I was watching very closely. He didn't look very fit. He looked like he was carrying his leg like a suitcase. Not happy about him at the moment. That's a worry. Offensively, we have problems because Theo's out the door, Giroud's a lamppost, and Welbeck's running with a limp.
I love you.
I'm concerned. I'm concerned. I'm really concerned about our offensive power and what options we have. And I don't see any. We've got midfield options we can debate. We've got wing-back options we can debate. We've got multiple centre halves, but I'm worried about our offensive power and the health of them and the state of them mentally, because Sanchez looks like he's in departure lounge. So I'm concerned. But Newcastle, if we don't win that, this podcast needs to double in length by next week, because it'll be an eruption. Right, so we hopefully win that. It's all about Liverpool on the 22nd, and that's the game to really focus on.
Look, I have tried to be, I think, measured in my response to these games. They're away games. They're against packed defenses. They were not good performances. You're right, though. Newcastle at the Emirates, a place where we've been very, very good. The manager has to get it right. He has to pick the players that can make the decisive involvement, and we have to do it, because when Liverpool come to the Emirates, look, We're 1 point back of a top 4 spot. As bad as it's been, I still favor us for that. But this is the period now where no more fucking around. We've got to defend our home pitch because our away form has been so dodgy. So we'll see what happens. I think that is a bellwether game for us in a lot of ways. And, unfortunately, it comes on the heels of 2 draws, but we're not off the rails. We're not off the rails. We've seen other big clubs stumbling. There's a lot of flawed teams out there. The goal is in the title. We're 19 points adrift of the title. Like, it is what it is. The goal is to get back in the top 4, and it's still very much alive. So let's not throw our toys out of the pram until Saturday evening. In any event, thanks to Clive for jumping on late. Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Tim is, of course, on Twitter at Stoberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Paul will be back probably around the same time Lock as that is, and we'll see what happens there. In any event, give us 5-star review. Write nasty things about all of us. We're all terrible people. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Newcastle 0.